prayer, please, to start?
Sure, absolutely.
Ha!
Let me come
They'll
over
teach
here.
you.
Grab somebody's hand.
Somebody's, which one? Somebody's or the one next to you?
Yep.
There's somebody's hand.
Okay, here we go. Dear Lord, thank you so much for bringing us together here to hear Becca speak, to help us learn better how to live our lives in a way that suits you. And thank you so much for having our children here, that we can teach them and help them learn about you in so many different ways. And we just hope that you will bless our time together and help us take it to all of those around us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Michael, how long will they be doing their thing?
You have about an hour-ish?
Perfect. That's what I need. About an hour-ish.
You have till 7:45.
Okay, I'll have to talk a little faster. All right.
But I mean, if you need to keep the adults here, you are more than welcome to, because
Okay.
we're not done upstairs till 8:50.
Well, if you keep talking, I'm gonna run out of time. So, okay, thanks, Michael. All right, so let's get started. Some of you who were at Ladies Retreat will recognize a little bit of what I'm going to talk about, but there's enough new stuff that it'll keep your interest. So you'll probably recognize this as the last straw game. Did you guys play that growing up? Nobody. You, Tom did. And he didn't even grow up with me.
Because he's from Texas.
No, but my best friend, she had the last straw game, and I had the Operation game. You guys know that, right?
Yes.
Oh, and she had Rock'em Sock'em Robots, and I was really jealous. That was cool. So the idea of this game is you take these. Here's a camel that's got like a break between the humps, and it's saddlebags. And the idea is you take turns putting in the little sticks. This is really old, so it doesn't hold together very well. That's why I've got it braced. But you and your friend take turns putting sticks in, and the one who finally makes it, I'm going to move that so it'll probably go really fast. The one who makes it fall obviously loses. I had Hope do this at Ladies Retreat, and when it broke, she just jumped about a foot. Oh, look, like I am. So that is the last straw game. And although Tom and I are the only ones who played that growing up, we know what that feels like when things just keep coming one after another, after another, after another, until finally it breaks your back and you crash. We get totally out of balance and maybe even burned out when stuff just keeps coming at us. Which brings us to this seminar, Living a Life of Balance. How convenient that the seminar went along with that game that was here. So tonight's session is called We All Fall Down, Finding Your Balance in Life. And you guys surely remember this. There was that morbid nursery rhyme about ring around the rosies, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down, right? So that charming little rhyme dates back to the London plague of 1665. The ring of rosies described the red buboes or swollen lymph glands that were around people's necks when they had this, so bubonic plague. And the posies refer to herbs or flower petals that they kept in their pocket to breathe so that they would hopefully not breathe the germy air. They were breathing the nice, fresh, herby air. They didn't know as much as we do. And then the ashes was originally achu, which was a signal that, oh my gosh, you're getting sick. So it refers to the sneeze that was a sign of the coming illness. And then we all fall down while everybody died. So it was just a morbid little rhyme that we sing as kids, and we're just happy chanting that. So that was a chant about the Black Death of the bubonic plague, and it was really kind of morbid that the all fall down part is just like us. It's appropriate for a seminar on balance, because when you lose your balance, you fall down. So that's what we're going to talk about this evening, is about what it means to lose your balance, what causes it, and some things you can do about it. Tomorrow night, you've got an agenda there, a little flyer that shows what we're going to do each day, but tomorrow night we're going to talk about boundaries, which everybody needs to learn about boundaries. What they are, why they're important, and how to set and maintain them, and why it's important to balance. On Tuesday, we're going to talk about burnout, how to get out of it and how to prevent it. And then Wednesday even though VBS runs through Thursday, Wednesday will be the last night of our seminar in here, because the kids do their little program. And do we have an ice cream social? We have an
On
ice cream
Thursday.
social Thursday, so we'll be doing that. So you have to come on Wednesday to find out why it's called Apple Core Baltimore, all right? You gotta come to find that out. So what is balance? Well, it's both a noun and a verb, and we generally think of balance as the ability to spread your weight proportionally so that you don't fall over. So if you are willing to, stand up. If you're willing to, stand up. Okay, so we're gonna start out easy, because we're all getting older. Including me. So stand on one leg. Try not to have to hold on to anything. Try the other one. Whichever one felt the best, use that one, because we're going to do something else. Now stand on that strongest leg and try to put your other foot up by your knee. Okay, now close your eyes. Did it just get harder?
Yeah.
Okay, now put your foot down. Okay, now close your eyes and cross your arms in front of your chest and put that foot back up by your knee with your eyes closed. How's that?
Hard.
Okay, okay. Go ahead and sit down. Y'all look kind of funny doing that.
Can you do that?
That's why the video camera's on you.
I knew there was something wrong. Anyway, when you're trying to maintain your balance, you have to adjust the whole time. You don't just go, balance, and I'm good. Well, maybe some people do, like our daughter who did gymnastics, but most of us don't just go, balance, and we're good. We have to adjust back and forth and around. Speaking of our youngest daughter, Allie did competitive gymnastics for quite a few years, and my least favorite event was balance beam, because it's like that high and that wide, and these people do these crazy things on it that most people shouldn't be able to do on the ground. And sometimes stuff happens, and they fall, and they hit the beam, and they get knocked out, and they break things. And so as a parent, that is just a horrid thing to watch your child competing on that thing of torture. But anyway, it takes good balance to do balance beam. Another crazy activity is tightrope walking. Has anybody ever done that? How about in your backyard? Did you ever put like a little rope between things and you thought, I'm pretty good at this, right? So, but I will never understand why anybody in their right mind would walk on a tightrope between two 40-story buildings with no safety net under them, or even with a safety net. That's just crazy. I don't have that much courage or that much balance. But balance has other meanings too. The balance that we're going to be talking about today is a condition in which different things occur in equal or proper proportion, or they have equal or proper amounts of importance. And notice that balance doesn't necessarily mean everything is in equal proportion. It's about having proper proportions. So balance can be used as a noun, which we just talked about, a thing, but also a verb. And that means to offset or compare one thing with another thing. We balance something against another thing. So remember the days when we used checkbooks? Well, we used to balance them, or at least some people did. I don't think I did much because I was lazy. But in your checkbook, you would keep track of the money you spent, every time you spent some, the amount of money that you started with at the beginning of each month, and you get your bank statement. So with those nifty tools, you would look and make sure that you hadn't spent more during the month than you had in your account. And the idea was to make sure you had money in the account and didn't go below zero. So in balancing a checkbook, you want those inputs and your outputs to either be equal, or you want your inputs to be greater than your outputs. But we in our amazing intelligence have learned to both use and abuse credit. So theoretically, you can spend more money than you have. But just like in life, those choices are going to catch up with you and there will be consequences. So it feels like you can do whatever you want, but you can't. So we balance other things too. We balance tires on a car, we balance ideas, we balance our meals, or try to balance our eating. So what we'll be talking about today is in the seminar is life balance, where we take all the different roles and aspects of your life, your home life, your work life, your church life, your family life, your educational life, your recreational lives, and all those other parts of life. And we take a look at that and determine if we're paying too much or too little attention to the different pieces, and then figure out what we're going to do about it, if anything. So maintaining your balance isn't just a matter of adding more tasks or cutting out responsibilities. And those things are going to help, especially in the short run. But achieving and maintaining balance will involve taking a look at some other things, some less obvious things, like priorities and boundaries and contentment, expectations and assumptions, purposeful living and self-control. All of that factors into balance. Do you guys remember the Ed Sullivan Show? Some of you probably do, right?
A really big shoe.
Yeah. Well, on the Ed Sullivan Show, they used to have these plate spinners. You remember that? I think probably on Carol Burnett they had them too. But they'd have these long poles and these plates. And when I was a little kid and I was watching that, it was just mesmerizing. But what they would do was they'd have, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 long poles with plates, and they'd get them spinning. One guy would be getting them all spinning. And the idea was to keep each one spinning, just pay enough of attention to each one so that you didn't have any lose balance and come crashing to the ground. And then some of them got really good, and they would like balance chairs on each other and be on top of the chairs doing their plate spinning, and it was just like, whoa. But if they didn't pay enough attention to each plate and keep it going, or if they got off of balance, it would all come crashing down. So that's pretty entertaining to watch, like on a show, but it's no way to live your life. I mean, most of us, if we're honest, have a lot of plates spinning at any one time. We each play lots of different roles, and speaking for myself, I'm a wife, a mother, a sister to my siblings, a sister in Christ to you guys, a counselor, a teacher, a women's ministry leader. I like to exercise, and I like to read and travel and go to the movies, and probably some other stuff if I thought about it.
Mother-in-law.
Yeah, I'm a mother-in-law now. So anyway, each of those roles takes time and attention and effort, money, and a lot of emotion. And it's all great and meaningful and wonderful until one thing comes in and disrupts the balance, and then we just lose it. So if you look at your handout, the last 2 pages of your handout there, you'll find a couple of colorful pages that have the life balance wheel. And that wheel is a way of showing how we currently distribute our time and effort in several key areas of your life. So ideally, you want to pay a proper amount of attention to each area and not let one aspect of your life crowd out the others. So most of us can focus pretty heavily on one or a couple of areas at any one time, and but when we do that, the other areas suffer. So if we spend too much time in a certain area, our wheel is out of round, so to speak. And if we don't spend any time or just a little bit in some areas, we have a flat tire, we have a flat wheel. Anytime we neglect one area, we get out of balance. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes, not a long time, but to take a look at the wheel and think about how you're doing in each area. And what I want you to do is on that one where it's got the words around the outside, is take a look at each piece of the pie and think about how well or how poorly you're doing in each area. Then on a scale of 1 to 10, each one has a ruler. Just make a little dot or an X where you think that aspect of your life is right now. And connect the dots then and just see how round or flat your wheel is. So we'll just take, I don't know, not long at all, just kind of get an idea of what this is like.
10 being high, good.
10 is high, 1 means horrible, 10 means amazing. 5 means, it's all right.
And this is how much time we spend in each of these areas?
It's how satisfied you are with that aspect of your life. Like for instance, if you're doing horribly at work and you're not being able to put much time in it, that would be really low. Or if you're working a lot and your family life is suffering, family life might be very low. Does that make sense? Okay, it's like how well are you doing in that area? We're doing our life wheels, Michael.
Hey, real quick, just so you know, there will be games above us in about half an hour, so don't get a little bit loud. Just to let you know.
Berta Huffalo.
A bird of a feather.
We will compensate. We'll yell back at them. Yeah, and I'm not going to give you guys enough time to do this whole thing. I just want you to kind of do a few and see what's what. The first wheel has the titles around the outside. Those are the things that most people say are their main areas of life. But the second example has blanks there, so you can put whatever you want. If you've got something special going on or some area that is important to you, you can title your own pie.
And you wanted us to draw lines to the dots, you said?
If you want, yeah. That's kind of how you can see how round or not round it is. You can also color it, but I gave you a colorful one.
Next time we'll bring Crayolas.
So, I'm gonna keep talking while you do that, because I'm just gonna tell you a little bit more about the wheel and the balance. So just when you're tired of doing that, just stop and start listening again. So anyway, there's a caveat. There's gonna be times in life that call for juggling, when things just won't be in balance, and that's just fine. And some examples, maybe you have a really, really busy month at work, or you're working around a family member's illness or absence. When you have a new baby, things get really out of whack. You have to spend a lot of time on family, and work takes a slide. How about during Thanksgiving and Christmas? Things change. So the point is, no matter how well you plan and do things, how well you plan and schedule and work towards having a wonderfully balanced life, there's going to be times when that balance is upset because stuff happens, and that's just kind of the way life is. In fact, honestly, it would be really rare for people to have a circular wheel all the time, or really any time. It just doesn't kind of work that way. So that's why we need to talk about more than just how to live a balanced life. It's equally important to talk about what to do when things aren't and maybe can't be in balance, like the attitudes that we talked about earlier. So simply put, as you see areas in the wheel that are lacking your attention, spend some time setting some goals in those areas. Like if there's a part of that wheel that takes a big dive and you're going, oh my gosh, I need to pay more attention to that. Think about what things you can do to strengthen that area, specific things you can do. What?
Oh, sorry, just peeking at Kelsey's. She's got one area that's really down low.
Yeah, and some of them are going to be low, and you're going to say, I can't do anything about that right now. That's okay. This is just a tool to help you visualize what's going on. So hopefully you'll be able to come the next 3 days, because we'll talk about all the different things that go into dealing with life and balance. About 10 years ago, there was a young and very successful executive named Josh who was driving his new shiny red sports car through a neighborhood in Chicago. And this neighborhood in Chicago tended to have a lot of kids playing in the streets after school. So he was going kind of fast, but he was also watching to see if any kids darted out. And he thought he saw something, but nothing ran out. But then all of a sudden, bam, something hit the side of his shiny red new car. And it was a brick that had sailed into the passenger door of his shiny new red sports car. So he was stunned, and he slammed on his brakes and put it in reverse and got out. And he saw this little kid, this little guy standing there crying. Josh was mad because this was a shiny new red sports car. And so he grabs the kid and shakes him and says, what were you doing? This is my car. Do you know how much that's going to cost you? You know how much trouble you're going to be in, how much it's going to cost your family? And the little guy was crying, and he said, I'm sorry, I didn't know what else to do. And Josh was like, I can't believe you did that. What were you doing? And so Josh said, nobody else would stop. It's all I could think of to do. And so then Josh got a little curious, and the kid tears were dripping down his face. And he said, what was so important that you had to dent my car? And so he said, my brother fell out of his wheelchair, and he's big. He was like a really big kid, older than the little guy. And he said he fell out of his wheelchair, and he's hurt, and I can't get him up and back into his wheelchair. Nobody will stop. I've yelled for help, and nobody will stop. And I've got to get home because my mom will be mad if we're late. So all of a sudden, Josh was like, oh, shift his perspective a little bit. And so he went over there with the kid, and sure enough, there was this rather large, older boy who had fallen out of his wheelchair on the curb. You know how it can kind of lose balance. And so he helped pick him up, made sure he wasn't hurt too badly, and wiped his scrapes and his bruises and blood, and helped get them righted and on their way. And the little guy was pushing his brother as fast as he could because his mama was going to be mad. Well, anyway, Josh, the story's about Josh, not about the kid. But Josh was really moved beyond words, and he had kind of a lump in his throat he had to swallow down, because his initial reaction was just anger and frustration, and oh my gosh, my busy day has started off poorly, and now look at my new car, and blah. And then everything changed on him, because the kid had said nobody would help, nobody would stop. And so Josh ended up not getting his car fixed, because he wanted that reminder that don't go so fast through life that somebody has to throw a brick at me to get me to slow down. So that was a reminder for him as time went on that he needed to not go so fast and ignore the things that were around him. Good story for us. So we're talking about balance. And the law of balance is built into our universe. For things to function properly, it must be in equilibrium. So for example, the Earth. We don't vibrate when we rotate because it's balanced on its axis. Our planet is balanced perfectly. And we don't freeze to death or burn up because we're just the right distance from the sun. Nature exists in balanced ecosystems. An ecosystem is basically a community of living things and non-living things that work together. So some examples of ecosystems are coral reefs and savanna and rainforests and oceans, the aquatic ecosystem. So God built checks and balances into nature to keep everything in order and balance. In architecture, the stress on a building has to be balanced or everything will fall down. Think about those really tall skyscrapers and how perfectly balanced things must be so it doesn't crash. And our bodies work best when all our systems are balanced. Some examples of body systems are digestive, we know when that's out of whack. Our immune systems, we know when that's out of whack. Circulatory, skeletal, muscular system, all of that stuff. When we're imbalanced, we say we're ill, we have illness. And restoring balance is called healing. So there was an article from Reader's Digest a while back called The 7 Secrets of Peak Performance by Charles Garfield. I can't speak very well tonight, it's late. Dr. Charles Garfield, who's a professor at the University of California Medical School in San Francisco. And he's the head of a research institute called Peak Performance Center. So they studied 1,500 outstanding performers in a whole bunch of different fields, business, athletics, education, all sorts of areas of life, the top performers. And they were looking for some common denominators. Why did these people achieve, and these other people who work really, really hard and have all the same opportunities, they kind of just stay mediocre? What's the difference? They looked for commonalities, common denominators. And they found some. They actually found 7. But the number 1 characteristic of the top achievers in the world was that they lived a well-rounded life, which was kind of a surprise to some folks, because we think of people like Bill Gates or whoever, and we think computer, he's all about that day and night. You know, we think of the computer geek person who just stays, you know, late in the night doing their stuff, and that's not true. The people who are the most successful in their chosen areas live a balanced life. For them, work is not everything. They may work a lot, but they also know when to put work away and go home. They prize their time with close friends and family, and they know how to leave work at work. So they were balanced, which came as a little bit of surprise. And something else that was interesting too is if you hyper-focus, let's say on work long hours, don't make time for family, and don't have time to exercise, all those things, and don't sleep, eventually the areas that you're neglecting are going to come crashing down. And that's not a surprise. But the interesting thing was that in the area that you're hyper-focusing on, after a while that's going to crumble too, because you can't keep hyper-focusing and letting everything else go. Just like the ecosystems, after a while that just crumbles. It's kind of like a car. If you have a car with a tire that has a leak, you can still drive on it, but at some point it's going to blow. You can even drive on a flat tire, but if you keep doing that, it's not just going to damage that tire, it's going to damage the rim, and if you keep on doing that, the whole car's system may not be salvageable. So basically what we're saying is that anytime one part of your life becomes all important, everything, including that part, is eventually going to crumble. So as I listen to people talk about their lives in counseling, and think about my own life, I constantly hear 3 words. And the first one is busy. Simply put, we cram way too much into our days, and we live at a really frantic pace, which isn't surprising to any of you here. Do you remember the country band Alabama?
Mm-hmm.
And they have this song, I'm in a Hurry. It goes, I'm in a hurry to get things done. Oh, I rush and rush until life's no fun. All I really gotta do is live and die, but I'm in a hurry and don't know why. That's kind of like us sometimes. We feel weird if we're not so busy that we don't know how to think. So the first word was busy. The second thing I hear a lot is exhausted. So think about all the times you ask somebody, hey, how you doing? And what do they say? Oh, I'm so tired. I mean, a lot, almost all the time, people are just gonna say, I'm so tired, because we're tired. And it's because we're too busy. Studies show that 1/3 of the American population is chronically sleep deprived. And let me talk about that for a minute. I'm at an age now where sleep can be a challenge. Lots of my peers have trouble sleeping through the night. They'll have trouble going to sleep, they'll wake up in the middle of the night, not go back to sleep, that kind of stuff, for a variety of reasons. Unfortunately, I don't have that problem. So my problem is I choose to stay up really late on purpose and not get the sleep that I should, just because. I like the way the house feels when everybody's asleep. I like watching Jimmy Fallon late at night. I can come up with any number of excuses to stay up way too late, even though I know it's not good for me. Our bodies need sleep to repair, rest, and recharge for the next day. And studies have shown that those who don't get adequate sleep on a regular basis have weight issues and other health concerns. Scientists still don't fully understand sleep, like why we do it, why do we have to have that? But I know that a person can't go without sleep for more than a certain amount of time or they'll die. It's critically important. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention released a report in January 2013 that said that 4.2% of drivers reported falling asleep at the wheel within the previous month. Those are the ones who reported falling asleep. Most of us have little spurts where we fall asleep and you don't know it. Seriously, that happens. So if you think about how many cars you see every day, that's like 1 out of 25 where they fall asleep at least once a month driving. And according to the National Sleep Foundation's 2005 Sleep in America poll, 60% of adult drivers, or about 168 million people, say they've driven a vehicle while feeling really drowsy in the last year, and more than 1/3 have fallen asleep at the wheel. And you think about that, you're driving with those people, and maybe you are those people. So a study by researchers in Australia showed that being awake for 18 hours, which isn't too uncommon, but being awake for 18 hours produced an impairment equal to a blood alcohol level of between 0.05 and 0.10 after 24 hours. And 0.08 is considered legally drunk. So you can be more impaired than a legally drunk person if you haven't slept in 18 hours and you get behind the wheel. And that's perfectly legal. So sleep is important, and while we may not be able to control whether or not you wake up at 3:45 and can't go back to sleep, you can control things like caffeine consumption and regular bedtimes and things like that. And you get tired when your life is out of balance, whether you stay up late or not. When you're out of balance, you get tired. Anyone who's ever bought a new car or a new set of tires knows that when you buy the new tires, you got to get them balanced. If you don't, you're going to have a bumpy ride. The car won't handle those shocks and bumps as well because the tires are out of balance. And if you have an imbalanced tire, it's going to rub in the wrong place. You get a bald spot. So I won't say anything about the men in here who might be rubbing them. Anyway, got a little bald spot, okay? But if that keeps
Really
happening...
two guys.
I can't see it.
No, I don't see it from here. But anyway, if the tire keeps rubbing in the wrong spot, the bald spot, it's going to blow. And so we're like that too. Tires blow out, but we will blow up, and we will eventually burn out because of imbalance. So I hear people say they're busy, they're exhausted, and then the third thing that I hear them say is that their lives are empty. Something's missing. Our schedules may be full, but all that activity hasn't filled us up, and neither have our possessions. We're empty in our hearts and our souls. We're more connected than ever with our iPhones and with our screen addictions to Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Snapchat and Instagram and all those things, but people still feel empty. And don't get me wrong, I love Facebook and Twitter and all those other things. It's not that I think they're bad, but I think that we are addicted to them. So we're busy, we're exhausted, and we're empty. Anybody relate to that? Yeah, well the problem is we're kind of proud of being busy. So we ignore our exhaustion and we outright deny our emptiness. So we just keep going pretending like everything's peachy. So in my counseling practice, I'm a Christian counselor. And the Christian part tells you who I am and what I do. I'm a Christian, and as such, I believe in the power of God's word and in prayer and the saving grace of Jesus. And in my practice, I try to look to the Bible, excuse me, to give me insight and direction in helping my clients find the answers to their problems, because that's where the answers are. So I can't give real, meaningful, powerful answers without pointing to the source of those answers. And I use that same approach when I do a class like this. It's hard to come up with meaningful answers if you don't go to the source. So one of the first things I wanted to do when I was researching balance was to see what the Bible had to say about it. What examples there were of balance, both good and bad. And right off the bat, I thought about Jesus and thought about what a balanced life he had. If you'll look at, I think all the verses should be on your handout, but Luke 2, verse 52 says, Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. So he grew in all those areas. He grew in wisdom. That means he grew intellectually. He grew in stature. That means he grew physically. He grew in favor with God. That means he grew spiritually. And he grew in favor with men. That means he grew socially. He was the perfect picture of a balanced life. So when we get out of balance, we're generally in chaos. Okay, we're working so hard, but we're in chaos. But 1 Corinthians 14:33 says that God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. And if God authored peace, it seems like that would be a worthwhile pursuit, is to look for peace rather than chaos. So there's 5 areas in your personal life that you need to keep in balance. Number 1, we need to have mental balance. Look at Romans 12, verse 2. It says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. The renewing of your mind. Well, that means you're going to change the way you think about stuff. And that's cognitive behavioral counseling, which is what I do. The Bible is full of that. So take a look at the little stick figure picture that you have, because that kind of is a representation of how we think. Okay? The first picture shows something happens, and then that triggers a feeling in us, good, bad, or indifferent. But something happens, we feel something. Now, these things don't necessarily register for you, but they happen. A feeling leads to a thought, like, oh, that was swell, or I hate that, or whatever. And then that influences your actions. Okay? But the cool thing is, you can change that. So what transforms you? Is it your willpower? No. Is it hard work? Not really. But it's by the renewing of your mind. And that's what that second picture is. So if you look at that second picture, something happens. And your feelings say, oh, I hate that. I'm so frustrated. And your thought is, oh, I don't like that person. But then that's where your control comes in. You can change the thought. The feeling that started, it just came. You can't change that at that moment. But the thought, you can say, okay, wait a minute. That's not really fair. I don't want to be that kind of person. Okay, maybe they're having a hard day. Okay. And that softens your feeling. It cycles back around and you go, okay, I still don't like what happened, but okay, I can kind of put it in perspective. And then your thought is, okay, I can let that go. And your action will be different. Okay, that's the renewing of your mind. You have to stop at the thought part. So how do you find balance in your thoughts? Well, you balance it by screening the things that come into your mind. Unwanted thoughts are always going to come into your head. I have some people with obsessive compulsive disorder where it's only the thought process that's obsessive.